Welcome to Small Town Big Life Podcast, coming at you from the Bay Shop behind Grace Fellowship Church in Avis, Pennsylvania. Today, we have Jeff and Courtney Wheeler with us as guests, and my wife, Grace, is sitting there at the other end of the table. Oh, I may be talking funny. So we have a pretty interesting topic. It doesn't have a title. I got to figure out what it is. I think it's, what is it, Jeff? Psychology and Christianity. This was Jeff had an idea for a topic, and we usually do stuff you can talk about on the front porch, but this is stuff like you talk about further out in the yard. No, I'm just kidding.
Way out in the yard.
About Jesus and psychology and how the psychology of belief works. And I mean, am I getting it right?
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of started because I had a buddy of mine who was on the fence about what he actually believed.
Yeah.
And he started asking me some psychological questions, and he looked at me and he goes, I think I believe more than you do. And I looked at him and I said, no, that stuff actually proves belief in God.
Psychology, the way it works?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I had a friend one time who said something to me like, we were talking this a few years back. He said, well, I just don't, he's talking about not being a Christian. He said, I just don't need that crutch, religion. I don't need that crutch like other people do, but I'm not against people that have it. And I said, it's not a crutch, you dummy. It's what kicks the crutches out from underneath you because you see more. It's not a crutch. It's the opposite of a crutch. It's like, oh, things look different when I accept, anyway. So that's kind of my take on it. And it sounds like that what he said to you was similar.
Very much so. I think there's human beings as a whole just want to rely on themselves. We live in a very self-centered world that's focused on, I'm going to get mine. This is what I believe. And that is the truth. And we live in a world that's just changed the meanings of what things are. And they're not really true, not from an academic standpoint, not from a biblical standpoint, not from any standpoint, but what someone wants to believe right down to, oh, I believe I'm a cat, so therefore I am a cat. No, that's a perspective. It's not a truth.
No, it's not a truth. And yeah, you're right. We do live in a world where people do that a lot now. I had something to say about what you started there off, but I forgot. What say you, Courtney? You got something to say about this?
I was just thinking, like, the more that I learn about things, there's an opinion on everything, and it is hard to figure out what the truth is because there's two sides to everything. And I think the only truth is God's love, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely something for those of us who experience it, it's not something you believe anymore. You're like, now I know it. I mean, I know it's real. It's not something I was talking to somebody about. Well, I've talked about this in sermons before. I said, the love of God or the presence of God. It's like, you could say love. Do you love someone? Yeah. Well, prove it. How? What do you mean prove it? Well, you can't hook somebody up to a lie detector test to see if that you can tell if they're being deceptive, but you can't measure love. You can take their temperature to see if they're hot or they're cold or running a fever, and you can't tell love. But if you tell someone, I don't believe you, you don't love your kids, I don't believe you because you can't prove it, you would get irate. You would say, yes, I do because I know it's there. That's kind of the relationship with God. That's the realm, the unseen realm, I think, where those things are. And that's why people who experience it are so adamant that it is real, because it's not something they just believe anymore. It's something they know.
Yeah.
It's just like, we're in...
Get up on the mic a little bit.
We're in natural opposition to God.
Yeah.
So knowing the truth versus being in the world, there's a big difference. And that's why we need psychology, to decipher the mind, what the world is viewing in relation to Christianity. It's a complete opposition.
There's so much opposition that you can teach someone from fact, and they will still look you in the eye and say, no, you're wrong, because that's not what I believe.
And that's what I was going to say a minute ago. People say, well, it's not true. It's just it's a man-made, religion's a man-made thing to control mankind. And I'm like, what? Look out the window. Tell me how that's working out.
Exactly.
It's not. If man had it his way, there'd be no God. Man wouldn't invent God. Man would. In fact, the world, most of the people don't want there to be a God, so they're like, no. That's why they don't believe, because man wouldn't invent a God. I don't know.
Yeah, but there are some people that will still look out the window and say the sky is green.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, that belief system, and we spend most days trying to break this down with basic interactions of, well, my perspective is my reality. No. Reality is still reality, regardless of what your perspective is.
Yeah.
We're afraid to wake up and admit we're wrong.
Yes.
Yeah, that's big time.
I feel like the world provides a lot of things that go against, that prove otherwise, Does that make any sense?
No, what do you mean? That proves otherwise.
I understand what
Like,
you're saying.
when I talk to my friends or people who aren't believers, they have a lot of evidence against it, and I honestly don't always have like an argument. And it's not that they're like trying to prove me wrong. They're like, this is why I don't believe.
Oh yeah,
And they have some good points, and I'm like, I honestly don't know what the answer to that is.
Yeah.
But I feel like the more they see me believing and they see my life and my, I guess, fulfillment, the more they want to believe, if that makes sense.
And you're right. There's a laundry list of reasons that you could give and say, well, here's why. What do you think?
Well, you say a lot, science is the language of God.
Science is the language of God, yeah.
And I like that a lot, because we can use science and use these theories and the proof of things to try to explain things to other people. And I'm curious about the psychology side of it, as far as even generationally, because some people who grew up with religion, I didn't, but some people who grew up with religion, that's just what they've known from day one. That's what it is, and that's it. And that's it. Right. So is it harder to talk to someone like that versus someone who's in this newer generation of me? I'm going to do everything myself. I don't need a higher power. I don't need to believe. I mean, how do you break those gaps?
I think personally, a lot of people, what it takes, no matter what side of the fence you're on, is a spiritual smack in the mouth. My favorite, one of my favorite quotes is Mike Tyson. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Yeah. Right.
And what I mean by that is, if you're not a believer, then someone you love dies or gets killed, and then something hits you that has never hit you before. And you're like, wow, this is real. This is permanent. Meaning the loss. This isn't something, when you're going through and you think everything's going to be okay, and you get smacked in the mouth by this life, and something has changed that will never be the same. I think a lot of people, that's their moment when they go, I got to search. There's something bigger going on here. And that can work both ways too, because some people who have strong faith, something terrible happens and they're like, God, how could you do this to me? How could you let this happen to me? Right. I mean, I love you. I worship you. I'm faithful in church. And, you took, my child from me. Why would you do this? I mean, so those hard moments are whether it be for belief or against belief, are when people start really opening their eyes and looking around. Either, hey, God, I'm mad at you, or hey, now I'm starting to think you're there. One of those two extremes. I know, by the way, I'm talking, I have a thing in my mouth. I'm saying this for people listening too, because I had a dental thing the other day, and it's awful. So it's just, so if I sound funny, that's why.
Well, if Meyer Courtney's lisp comes out, it's an accident.
Okay.
So
all right.
We'll keep it minimal.
Yeah, I wasn't going to do this either.
Go for it. Go for the cheese.
Yeah.
What you were kind of alluding to a little bit is like perspective. And what's interesting about psychology is there's so many different angles and perspectives you can look at it. And people latch onto one perspective and they hold it and they believe that it's true, but it's not always true unless you add all the other perspectives into it. Like I know me and you talked about, there's a positive psychology. Everything isn't a disease anymore. People have disorders of the mind, but they can be reordered. That's why they're disordered. If you're diseased, it becomes very, very hard to change it. All right. we've come to a point where we're always looking for excuses for poor behavior.
Right.
And there's a big struggle in the mental health world right now about, all right, what is an actual disorder and what is just poor behavior? Because now I'm just using my disease or disorder as an excuse for bad behavior when we know that's not true, because I'm afraid I might hurt someone's feelings if I tell them the truth.
Yeah, well, victimology is an ideology.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or victimism, I should say.
Victimologists. I read a paper I talked about it in a sermon once of, I think it was Sigmund. He was the head of the American Psychological Association. Anyway, talking about overprescribing things, and he said we're becoming pathologizers and victimologists and telling people that everything is related to some other problem they had. You're self-medicating because you were molested when you were a child. And everyone, to find what it is like you just said, they have to assign blame instead of saying, and I tell people, listen, if everyone who had trauma was an addict, there would be no non-addicts.
That's right.
Because everyone has had trauma in this life. And so, you and I were involved in someone's life very recently, helping them. And the very first conversation I had with them, I said, we're not going to get on any roads where you tell me you're a victim or something bad happened, because we're not going to start off with that lie. You do drugs because it feels good, and being buzzed is fun, and you started doing it too much, and now here you are. Don't tell me something bad happened, because we're not going to, no victim language, or you won't get better. We have to use accountability, and it's that way. I don't know, that applies to faith too, and I what I mean by that is not in the victim sense, but in the sense that when something terrible happens, if we have faith, we know our faith tells us, Jesus tells us, terrible things are going to happen here. And that's why you need to double down on your relationship with God to get through those terrible things. So people are fooling themselves if they think, well, because I have a good relationship with God, nothing bad is going to happen. No, it's largely because bad things are going to happen that you need a relationship with God.
In the psychological world, we have an out for that.
Yeah.
And it's causation and correlation are two different things. There is a large correlation between a lot of things, but that doesn't mean it's the exact cause. But people don't want to hear that. Like, we want to assume cause right away. Everything is not a cause and effect model. It's not. Because I do some bad things in my life doesn't mean bad things are going to continue to occur in my life. Because I do good things in my life doesn't mean I'm going to get good. And even some people in Christian sects believe that doing good gets good. That hope, that health, wealth, prosperity. No, that's not how it works. Good and bad things happen to good and bad people. Your response to it is how you build your character and your relationship ultimately with God. Because if he gave me everything I wanted, boy, I'd be in bad shape. I wouldn't need him.
Right.
I'd be in bad shape.
Yeah.
I was, I started to address these talking points, because we probably won't get through. There's a lot on here. Get all through these, and I just made my own sheet. And based on the opening statement, how does psychology help explain why people believe in Jesus? Understanding history and psychology can give us a new perspective in faith. I got cognitive psychology, social psychology, existential psychology, historical psychology, and attachment theory. And I started reading through these. I thought, this is one question that I worked on answering, and then I thought, how do we dumb this down and make it go in an hour?
Well,
it's
simple. At least in my mind, it's
because the opening's going great so far.
My wife, as much as I love her, tells me I'm the dumbest smart person she's ever met, which is very true.
It's light compared to what I hear.
I told you this is normal, right? So
I can handle things. I'm smart.
Yeah.
Like everybody says. Like dumb, I'm smart, and I want respect.
Thank you, Fredo. Thank you, Fredo.
Yes.
yeah, facts.
Yeah.
For me, it's simple. Listen, you find me another human being that's going to create a neurotransmission. Find me another human being that can finitely tune a brain the way yours is tuned. And the reason I say yours is because everyone's individual. I love I've got a chemical imbalance. No, you don't. Show me one brain that's exactly like another
Yeah.
one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have twin boys at home, and they're so radically opposite.
Absolutely.
And there are no two brains.
It's like
made.
medicating kids.
Yes.
Because teachers didn't want to deal with high energy kids, so they're like, you know what?
Yes.
Something's wrong with this kid. Let's get him on some Ritalin. Because I used to have to go take my vitamin in third grade.
We were just talking about this. Like, if so many kids or people have this disorder, then why is it a disorder?
That's a good point.
Like,
Yeah.
if so many people have this, maybe it's something else that's wrong and not that
People don't want to
thing.
deal with it, it seems
Yes.
like. Because when I was a kid, a lot of the teachers were, well, I don't want to say elderly, but there weren't as many young teachers. I don't know if that's a generational thing or what that's going. But now younger people, they're more self-absorbed, so they don't want to put up with it either. And it falls back to what you just said. What you just said about the individual kids. Teachers are the same way. Some of them are like, well, they're kids. They're going to be this way.
Right.
And then there's other ones who are like, no, I can't deal with this. There's something wrong with this kid.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's like you said, if it's a bad thing, how come they all are like that?
Right.
My wife is like a really even keeled, mellow person. And like I said, I used to have to go take my vitamin at the nurse's office.
Where I went to school and grew up, ADHD got fixed with a belt. It was very
Settle down.
It was simple.
It was called settle down. Settle down. Settle down. That's
We're
what
going
it
to
was.
knock the energy right out of you.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I used to tell my daughter, go out and run around the house twice. Get it out of your system.
And now we have a little boy that's full of energy.
Yeah.
And we love it. But
Yeah.
no one else can
What's a
really
kid being a
understand.
kid?
Yeah.
Kids are not meant to sit in a desk for so many hours and
Exactly.
not jump in the mud puddle, right?
Right.
They jump in the mud puddle and they need medicated. It's
It is. It's a
Crazy.
cop out. It's because it's an inconvenience to somebody else. What do you think, Grace?
Yep. I don't know why it matters is because, since I was young, I always wondered why people believe what they believe. Why do you think the way that you do? I think it's really interesting to find out what makes people tick. And psychology, whether it be whatever theory it is, brings that into a little bit more clarity. If you don't have Jesus in your life, which is a whole different subject because psychology deals in the world a lot,
Yes.
right? And to be a Christian, we're not to be in the world or of the world, whichever that is. So it's a lot different
Well,
in the way you think.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's like Jackie was talking about.
Perspective.
Science is the language of God. Psychology is this is me talking, but it's of all the sciences and things we study, it's one of the ones that are based on more speculation than fact. And I only say that because I don't know. Like, I'm trying to think of some good examples. Here's body language. People say, well, you do this, or you look up to the right, or you look up to the left, they're being deceptive. No, they're not. That doesn't apply to every person. I know people who always seem like they're lying, and they're not. And I know people who fold their arms when they're not being protected or guarding themselves. I know people that look around when they're trying to recall something. They're not making something up. And I'm only using body language as one. Now, if you know the person, that's how you tell if they're lying. If I already know someone and I am already accustomed to their body language, then I stand a greater chance of telling if they're lying. I can't just apply one size fits all rule, and I'm going to speculate that applies to everyone because that's inaccurate. And so there's just one example. But the things that are discussed in psychology, like you said, coming back to the full circle here, the science being the language of God, everything Jesus said had a psychological purpose, principle, point, and path. And we don't stop and analyze it like that too often. But when you do, it's fascinating. And I do it in sermons all the time. When I discover something that was said a long time ago that he's saying here in a different way, but it's the same thing, and they make some kind of connection. We don't, in a sermon, sit around and evaluate the psychology of it, but it's there and it's abundant. So studying it is studying how the human mind works, which was, obviously created by God. What do you think?
Well, he wanted to say something.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And by dictionary form, psychology is the study of behavior and mental processes. No two human beings engage in the exact same behavior, right? Twins studies are all over psychology because, well, they have the same DNA component.
Right.
But raised in different environments, they're different people. Perspective change based on experience. So those twins could have the same experience and have different feelings and thoughts about anything. So it's really individualized, and this really shows the character of God and his likeness for each of us, which is what it gives to me. Now, when we actually study it, it's a matter of perspective. And when it comes down to, you have people that want to see everything from a biological perspective, which should play some role in it, and then you have people that want to see it just from a humanistic perspective, Can we just treat each other with unconditional positive regard? Sure, Carl Rogers was huge about that, and Rogers was also a Christian, was a big proponent of treat human beings the way they want to be treated, all right? But also show them where they may be being mistreated as a result. But when it came to behavioralists and therapy, every therapy model that you look at can be traced right back to the gospel, because all therapy models are based on something called Socratic questioning. And if you watch Jesus, if you look at Jesus' ministry, anytime he met with somebody, it's all Socratic questioning, but it was all based on the person he was sitting in front of. He knew how to meet that person, and he knew what question was going to empower them. He's not going to take the power away from you to make the decision, to see who he was. And then he passed that on to us. And as we pass it on, if we ask the right questions with the person in front of us, they will be empowered to know the right answers.
When you lead, I know when the Socratic questioning, when you lead somebody somewhere by asking them questions, they're more likely to remember it. Plus, they feel a stronger sense of like they discovered it.
Yeah.
Even though they know you asked them the questions. It's like you held their hand while they held the flashlight, and it's a greater sense of accomplishment, which has a deeper meaning to the person when they do it that way, as opposed to just going, "Look, here's the deal." And when you do that, people can tend to forget. And that's why I shouldn't have done this, but I taught my kids. I said, when you want information from someone, you have to disarm them, and the way to disarm someone is not to sit them down from across the table and go, "We need to talk." Though I said the way you do it is you build a comfort level, and I said, like, you get them to play a video game or something, and like if I wanted to know my daughter about somebody she was dating or her friend that got arrested for weed or so, this didn't happen, but if something like that happened, it happens in homes everywhere. I would just be playing a game or doing something. I'd be, I heard your friend got in trouble or whatever, and she, and so once they're disarmed or they're happy, then you can find out everything, and that applies to anyone. Adults, you first of all allow them to either control or think they're controlling the conversation, and then disarm them by comforting them, and you can get a lot of information. I mean, the police do that. My dad told me that when I was real young. He's like, well, you got to. He was a detective, homicide, and he would tell me how they talk to people, and it's so true. You can get so much out of someone by disarming them. So it comes full circle again by asking questions. You're providing a comfort level, and they're going, oh yeah, cool, and then they've got that sense of discovery. I babbled all that time to say that again.
We call that radical alignment.
Did I just do some radical alignment? What'd you say, Courtney?
It sounds like manipulation.
Yeah, it does, but it's not. It's strategy.
It's strategy.
It's a strategy.
It is a strategy.
It's not a manipulation, because I can say this with all honesty. I think manipulation is if you're trying to get someone to do something so you can better your own circumstances or get something from them.
Yeah.
Now, when I'm trying to get the truth, I don't look at that as something that's dishonest or wrong. So whatever path I have to lead them down to get to the truth. I want the truth.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, people ask me now, I'm like, I can manipulate easily. That's what I do for a living.
Yeah.
That's what I do for a living. And people are like, well, isn't that wrong? Well, you came here trying to get somewhere.
Right.
And my goal is to get you there. And if I do it through truth, is it really manipulation now?
Well, that's like people that say, they go, oh, that school indoctrinates people. Yes, that's what they do. They all
what a
indoctrinate.
school
I
is.
paid to be indoctrinated. I go,
Yeah.
it's just whether I buy what they're selling is a, yeah. So same thing. You're right. They do pay you for that.
I was going to say something about what Grace was saying earlier, and she made a key point about, being of this world and not tying with this world. And one of the great debates, as a Christian, looking at Romans 12:1 and 2, it does call us not to be in this world, but it also calls for a transformation of the mind.
Absolutely.
And mind transformation comes up several times. Not heart transformation, mind transformation, but my assessment from what I've read is that the heart and mind are both thinking tools in God's realm. Because he deals in the heart and he deals in the mind, but we're given direct order to get the mind dealt with first through the heart. Now, some people do have that white light, earth-shattering experience where they get dealt with in the heart. I've heard those testimonies. Not mine, don't understand it. I've read about it one or two times, but most people get dealt with in their mind first, because deep down inside each one of us, when you're doing wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You don't need anyone standing. God wrote his laws on the hearts. I mean, you don't need anybody standing over your shoulder. I've brought that up a million times, because you just do. You know when you're doing wrong.
But the other thing, too, that you say is Christianity gives us hard skin and a soft heart, where the world has
Soft skin and a hard heart. They're hurt and offended by everything, but their hearts are black and hard.
But you talk about change and the eternal and the external. So Jesus, when we have Jesus, we are changed from the internal, which gives us a different perspective of the external.
But looking at that, I mean, it's got to be, I know from my own experience, so difficult for someone who is slowly becoming a Christian, but dealing with the other psychological issues they might be dealing with at the same time. And you have the world telling you, oh, you're projecting the trauma with your parents, and you're doing this, and you're doing this, and you're doing this. And then this side is going, is it because I can't believe in something bigger than me? Is it because I can't comprehend this godlike figure doing something that hurts people? And I know for me, I really struggled with that. How can psychologically I'm doing this and this and this because of all this stuff, but what's God doing? And I don't understand why. And yeah, I think a lot of people must really struggle with that psychologically.
Well, psychologically, they struggle with it because your brain's only made to understand time, space, and matter.
Right.
And God transcends all three of those things. And our little peon of a brain is trying to wrap itself around something. It's so enormous that billions of us couldn't actually describe what is actually occurring. Sitting down, I've listened to hundreds of preachers talk about revelations, and I still haven't gotten a straight answer. You know what I mean? We've gotten some answers, but the truth is, people don't want to believe in what they can't exactly know.
I had a
We also want to, we have a need to understand. And
questions don't need answers. People do.
you're right.
Fact.
Yeah.
Fact.
So I had a professor come out one time. He brought this steel part out and handed it around and said, "Everybody knows what this is?" Because he worked on the space shuttle. And he said, "That's a part of the landing gear for the space shuttle." And that cost $250,000. It was about the size of a coffee cup. It wasn't real big. It was really light and it was metal. He said, "That's obviously not the real one. It's a duplicate." He said, "But here's the thing. That had to come into the atmosphere and re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. We had hundreds of scientists look at it. They read the chemical compositions in different countries. We passed it through everyone, through all these tests. I had the greatest scientific minds in the world. Look at this. And before we made it, and before we used it, and $250,000 is a lot of money for something that big. And he said, but it worked. And then he said it worked, and the greatest minds in the world looked at it, and we succeeded. He said, now, if I could go through history and get all the greatest scientific minds in history, including the ones you know, Einstein, Da Vinci, everyone, just put them all together and come up with a plan to make something, I still couldn't make one of these. And he pulled out a branch.
Facts.
Because I still couldn't make one of those. And then he goes, I don't care how many people I got together, and I tried to work through it, we wouldn't be able to do that. And I was like, well, I just made a profound point pretty quick. Now, I know people say, I think you have to. It takes a bigger leap of faith to think that everything just happened.
Oh, yeah.
Because really, that's a cop-out. What happened? Well, it just happened.
Yeah.
How? I don't know. Because that's what the Big Bang is. I don't know. Just, there it is. And we all know the old formula. We've probably heard in sermons everywhere. There has to be a God, because nothing plus nothing equals nothing. Only nothing plus something equals something. And so I struggle to understand how anyone could get to that point where they're like, when they question things, they're like, it just happened. It just happened. And so you were talking about a second ago, the things people struggle with. Some people don't like to, they're always trying to get God off the hook. I mean, Christians, because despite the fact that the Old Testament is a brutal R-rated book, and Jesus told us it's going to be nasty here. I mean, look what they did to him, and it's going to be tough here, and people, when they meet a prospective new Christian, they start off with the fluffy icing stuff, and to have the Lord in your life, and if you confess, and everything's going to be great, and they start kind of, not necessarily the prosperity gospel, but the healing begins, and your kids might come home, and a lot of your kids are going to disown you, and your friends are going to call you an idiot, and then they get disappointed, and people try to get God off the hook. Well, how could God be like the devil? Well, why did God make the devil? He's a devil. He's God's devil, but he's a devil. And it's like, there's a lot to navigate that people think, well, how could God do this stuff? And I tell people, this old joke kind of remedies a lot of things about the existence of good and evil. And it's a simple analogy. And it's someone who says, well, is God everywhere? Yeah, he's everywhere. The atheist says, yeah, he's, or the Christian says he's everywhere. And the atheist says everywhere. So your God is everywhere. So that means God is even in brothels and casinos, because if he's everywhere, he's there. He said, yep, he is. And he said, well, then how can a holy God spend time in a brothel or a casino? And the answer was, the manure is affected by the sunlight. The sunlight is not affected by the manure. And I thought, wow, that's it. That's pretty simple. So just because the two are present, there is one that has power over the other. I mean, and that is what we align ourselves with universally, psychologically, and spiritually. That doesn't mean we're not going to get thorns under our feet. It just means we know when we get plucked out of the water which dock we're going to. I guess is easy, the analogy. But
Well, and we look for other outs.
What do you mean?
Well, we're looking to worship rocks and
the creation instead of the creator.
Yeah, exactly. We're looking so much into even historical context can be taken way out of place, and sometimes even in Christianity, we used Christianity as a way to control people in a wrong way.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And
any belief system is, people will.
And people they want to have their own power and control. They don't want to give into it, saying what's really good for them, because it's a human need. We all need some power and control and some freedom in our lives, but they don't realize that it's the Jehovah God that's given the freedom, not me creating my own freedom. And telling someone that, they're like, you've lost your mind. You don't know how persecuted I am. And I'm like, you don't know how persecuted we all are. What does that have to do with Christ? Because you have no understanding of the level.
Right.
Well, it comes down to what the human mind can actually fathom. There was this guy, Carl Jung. Most people, if you've ever taken a psychology class, they talk about Carl Jung because he came in right behind Sigmund Freud. Right? Freud said that every human being, we have an ego, and we've got a superego, and we got an id. And we kind of figure that's right. It's kind of like picturing Fred Flintstone back in the day. He's got an angel on his shoulder, and he's got a demon on his shoulder. And he said that's how human personality and consciousness works. Well, he's pretty much right. On the inside of us, there is that voice that tells us this is the right thing to do. It's usually the hardest thing to do, and it's what you don't want to do because it goes against your exact nature. And there's this other voice that goes, there's an easier way.
Right.
And that one feeds my ego. It makes me feel good all the time. It is so much easier to listen to that voice.
Absolutely.
We're lazy. We don't like to do hard work. Well, Jung came in, and he says, Freud's right about all that. But he forgot about the collective unconscious. And everybody said, collective unconscious. He said, deep down inside every man that has ever been birthed on this earth is a spiritual understanding of God. That's why that superego exists. That's why moral value exists.
Yeah.
And he was able to pinpoint it out. But we don't talk about that a whole lot in psychology classes anymore.
No, because there's accountability, integrity, forgiveness, compassion, and yeah.
And when we talk about Satan or the devil or the adversary or whatever like that, it's a lot of time too trivialized. You know, it's cartoonized like the horns and all that stuff, and they're these powers. But what you just said about what you started off with the example we all have seen with the conscious speaking to us the easy way, and then went to the easy way and the hard way. You said, I mean, this is what I took from what you said. Man has a deep desire to understand or know God or the spiritual things therein.
Absolutely.
And I think that for every need you have, God has a way. You guys have probably heard me say this before. To meet it, I mean, like you need to sleep and rest. God gives you sleep, and Satan gives you sloth. You need to drink. God gives you thirst. God gives you drink, water, whatever. Satan gives you drunkenness. You have a sex drive. God gives you marriage. Satan gives you fornication. You need to eat. You know, God gives us food. Satan gives us gluttony. You have a desire to know God, and God has not given you a desire for something that is unattainable. All the things you desire that is a need is available to you. You can get it. But your deepest need is to know God. And I believe that need would not be put within us if it were unreachable. Because anything else we desire that we need, we can get. It's just like exactly what you said. There's the right way to go, the hard way, meet the girl, go on the date, meet her parents, go through all that stuff, get to know her, and then get married.
Courtship. That exists?
Courtship.
Yeah, so that's the right way, but you said that's the harder way. Or you can take the easy way. What's the devil say? Go out, get her liquored up, go to a party, try to manipulate the entire situation to your advantage. That's easier. So you're exactly right. And also spot on about, it seems like it's harder to do the right thing, but when you look back and you follow God's, I always tell people, when God says, thou shalt not, he's saying, I want you to be safe. And when God says, thou shalt, he's saying, I want you to be happy. So sometimes, we look at it and our mind, it's like you say, it's so easy to say, well, if I just do this one thing just real quick, it won't. I mean, I do that every day on the freeway. I mean, I'm going like, I know it says 55, but I'm just look, there's no cops. I mean, I'm not really hurting anyone. There's no one around. I mean, not every day, but I'm just using that as an example so people don't hear about all the banks I robbed. Oh, just kidding. No, but it is. It's also more rewarding when you do something the right way. When you look at it, you're like, you know what? I own this because I did it the right way, and so man, it feels so much better. There is a reward. There's a piece of cheese at the end of that maze. Don't you think?
Yeah, there's a lot of cheese there.
Yeah.
Well, let me throw a ringer in this.
Yeah, go ahead.
So why Christ? Why not some other religion? What makes the difference in the human mind? Where's historical context make a difference in what we understand from 5,000 years of man's evolution?
Well, I think I can answer that pretty easily. For me, everyone probably has a different answer. I think that, to me, Christianity is the only belief system that is self-evident that it's true, because there are things in it where people disclose their own flaws. When man invents his own gods, they look like man. They need constant appeasement. They're ogres. They want you to have orgies or they're going to burn your crops. And they want gold and they want sacrifice. And that's man-made religions look a lot like man. And when I look at Christianity, it doesn't want anything from me. It doesn't want me to stroke checks. It doesn't want me to seek power. It tells me everything that is counterintuitive to my nature. And that makes me scratch my head and go, there must be something going on here. And that's, for me, I thought you were getting ready to write something.
I was just going to tell you that small camera just turned off. That one.
Oh, that's okay. That was just a test thing I was doing.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you,
We're
though.
good.
Very
Yeah.
observant. Thank you.
So we know we've done some MRI studies and some PET scans
Right.
on people.
Well, wait a minute. I want to know before you get into the science of it. Tell me what makes you say, you know what, Christianity over the other ones? Yep.
Well, I've looked into the other ones, first and foremost, and I look what's under Abrahamic code first and foremost. So I look at Islam, and here comes Muhammad 600 years post-Christ to say that he's been whisked away to the Lord to come back and testify that he was not God, yet we will call him Isa, and we'll have a book in the Quran called Miriam to recognize the virgin birth, to draw Christians in, and I've been victimized by that. I was willing to sit enough and listen, but here I have a book of guys who dwelled with Christ, who lived with him and said, no, he said he was the Lord. We believed him, we wrote it down. For me, it's very easy to see that this guy's testimony of being with him versus a supposed prophet that came 600 years post.
Right.
I'm going to take the guy's word for it who was with him.
Several of them, actually, but yeah.
Then I look at our Jewish brethren. Well, why don't they come to the Lord? I look at world history, and I see the diasporas that have happened several times. I see how women have been treated in our societies, and if God makes you as a high being on this world, because woman's his final creation, his most detailed creation, he holds them in high standard. He holds the Jewish people in very high standard. They're the ones that are going to get beat up on the most in this world, the ones that God has a high standard on.
Right.
So that's clear evidence to me. People would be like, that's a terrible thing. No, it's evidence.
So what was the wrench you were going to...
Well, why not another religion? What I was going to say from a scientific perspective, if you put people under PET scan who are believers of different faith,
Right.
Christians always produce large amounts more of dopamine in the prefrontal cortex, which is our higher level thinking.
Amen.
And we've seen it over and over again. There's psychological proof to show that belief in Christ, people have hope for the future,
Yeah.
regardless of whatever they're going through. That other people of faith in other religions, maybe devout faith in other religions, don't show.
Yeah.
Do you-
I've heard that similar stuff.
Yeah. Do you think that's because there is so much negativity in some of the other religions, like I will jihad and everything else? And that's what we hear constantly.
That's where the spiritual aspect is for me, because I know some people who are deeply religious in other faiths, whether I agree with them or not. Unless they ask me, I don't have that conversation.
Right.
Nor do I thrust myself into those conversations because they're not going to be fruitful in most cases. But I think it's more of we know because there's more evidence of it. When we look around and when you make that profession of faith and you start reading scripture and you start seeing the correlations between world history, where we are at now, what was perceived and prophesied, there's too much evidence.
I agree with that. You're right. People will fight it though. It's like Courtney said earlier. people will come up with very many reasons. And like you said, you get to the point where you're like,
I don't know.
you know, this is what I believe. Okay, you can keep throwing stones all you want, but I can't answer every question. No one can answer every question.
Well, I think it's great that every sacred script ever written by any religion mentions Christ. They all mention Christ.
He exists
In all of them, but we don't mention any of those other ones, which is really interesting to me. That means they don't have.
They're man-made religion.
That's a good point.
Was you here when I preached about the whole Islamic? Man, never mind. I'll get into that. I don't want to get into that stuff.
What I would be like for me, what I'm very careful of, right? Those are people still under Abrahamic code, right?
Who's under Abrahamic code?
Islam, right?
They're under a version of it.
Well,
I mean,
I'll give you my belief, and you correct me.
Tell me
It's gone lots of different ways. I mean, Ishmael was born from Abraham, was granted the father, whatever. We hear of the Ishmaelites' testimony and talk forth. But we know that Isaac had to come from Sarah. You know, that was told. We know it, right? That was all created because we know Christ came from the house of David, and that's why they wanted to dismiss, who Jesus was, because the house of David was in line with. Well,
they think
Jacob.
he's a prophet, and he's in their religion. He's a prophet. He's going to come back, and he's going to behead Christians and talk about how we were wrong, and but they have it's a very distorted version of Christianity. In fact, not only distorted, exact opposites.
Right.
The 12th Imam. What we call the Antichrist, they call the 12th Imam. That's their the things we're waiting to fight against, they're touting as their saviors. But you see how people get manipulated into the religion because they go, hey, we're not that much different than Christianity. We love Jesus. We worship the God of Abraham. And people go, well, really? That's great. They go, and they get sucked into it.
Yeah. I know for me, the first word spoken of self as God, Elohim, was plural. So it was all plotted out. It was all prepared. And I know that it's unfolding exactly the way it's supposed to. And I think in the Christian mind, when I look at life, there's only two perspectives. We've had this. I'm either living in the right here, right now, where I'm supposed to be, and I'm just talking to some people, hanging out with some good people, or I'm thinking of things eternal, because all the in-between stuff either makes me feel depressed, it makes me feel anxious, if I'm thinking about what I got to go get done, if I'm thinking about anything else but where I'm at and where I'm going, I'm going to cause pain in my life.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
I admit, though, I am preoccupied because I know my wife is making crawfish etouffee when we leave here, and I cannot quit thinking about other.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Have you heard
At no
this?
point in your rambling.
Okay, sorry, I won't play the whole thing.
Thank you.
You said a Mike Tyson quote earlier, and all I could think about was, I broke my back. My back is broken.
What do you think about all this, Jackie? We were like,
we just went in a lot of different directions.
we did. Well, these are the kind of conversations that you have in your living room.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
I'm going down the list. Go ahead.
I was just going to say one of the interesting things I thought on the whole sheet here was Jesus as a psychological archetype, as a hero, which to you and I ties in Star Wars mythology, that Star Wars is really...
Well, Lucas said he tapped into several religions while making Buddhism and Christianity. And he wanted to go in all these. Darth Maul, they said, he was asking people, what scares you the most? And they're clowns. And then they said, but the Book of Revelation, the beast with the 10 horns. And so all these little subliminal things he tries to put in from different world belief systems. So there's subliminally. Are you a Star Wars fan?
Even the term Jedi is Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Isaiah.
Yeah.
Are you a Star Wars fan?
4, 5, and 6.
Well, all right. That's
okay. We can still be friends, I think.
I mean, I like
the
to a
first
little
three.
bit.
Yeah. Okay. 4, 5, and 6. Yeah, we can still be friends.
The first three movies. What do you mean that we can still?
No, I had to think about it. No, I had to think about it.
Yeah,
in my
Episode
head.
5 is one of the greatest movies ever made.
The Empire Strikes Back.
Absolutely.
I'm not a big fantasy person. Like, I tell her all the time that Harry Potter just was stolen from Star Wars.
It's a vehicle for storytelling. I told my daughter when I was in film school, she was in film. I said, listen, what's going to last from the last century in film school that's going to come up is Star Wars and The Godfather.
Yeah.
And they're both about families.
Right.
One of them is just told in a different setting. I said that those are the two most powerful stories in film that will never not be in film class and discussed. And Jaws, but that's for cinematography, script reasons and all this stuff. But anyway.
But do we see Luke as the Jesus figure just because we're Christians, or because we're used to seeing the hero?
You see, here's the thing about that. They don't quite nail any of them. Luke is a little bit of the prodigal son. Mm-hmm. Anakin is a little bit of the prodigal son as well, because he goes off and he does his conquering and he comes back and he gets beat down and he's humbled. But it's not his father who humbles him, it's his son.
Right.
And so there's a lot of twists. Like, he uses parts of our belief systems, but he puts an interesting twist in there, I think, so we just can't predict it.
Yeah.
But in the philosophies of he leads to fear and feeling, all that. See, that's good. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's good.
You know what's funny is the archetype concept comes from Carl Jung.
Yeah.
And he had that from
Comes from
belief
what?
system. It comes from Carl Jung. And he was the one that came with the collective unconscious, that spirituality is deeply built into man. It's deeply driven into him. And we will naturally see things in this way, Christian or not. You will look for heroes. You will look for a parental role. You will look for the antagonist. Mm-hmm. Even in your life, when you're looking around at your group of friends, everybody fulfills a role.
Do you think that's why we cling to our superhero movies so much, our Marvel, our DC, because it's comfortable? I know, okay, that's the bad guy, that's the good guy. The good guy is going to win at the end. Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with this.
Yeah.
I can watch this. I don't have to think.
I think the world loves people that wear masks.
Ooh,
That was deep.
that was deep.
I really do. I think the world loves people who wear masks. They're looking for people who wear masks.
Are you a comic book fan?
Not really.
Okay, well, I am.
I'm a dork that collects hockey cards. So.
No, that's not dorky. I quit collecting reading heavily in 7 or 8 years ago when they started getting woke and nauseating. But there's some themes that never left. And what you just said is something pretty profound, because when I was a kid, comic books were written mostly for kids. But the people who grew up with them, the writers they grew up too. And they started getting more sophisticated, and so did the storytelling. And anyone will tell you, the world loves people who wear masks. And it's funny because my wife has heard every nerdy comic book conversation there is, but the theme in Spider-Man, it doesn't matter what you think about the movies or anything, it was just the character. The overarching theme, his banner, is that Peter Parker is the real person. Spider-Man is just a front. That's a mask. That's what he wears. But Peter Parker is the core, the man that you want to know, the person who is saving lives, the person who cares. With great power comes great responsibility. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's all about Peter Parker. Now, to put a spin on that, I'm not a DC fan, but Batman is the opposite. Bruce Wayne is the facade. Mm-hmm. Bruce Wayne is what's fake. Only when he has the mask on does he become what he truly is. And that's justice and vengeance. And he's hurting because of what happened to his parents. And, with Spider-Man's mantra, with great power comes great responsibility. With Batman, one of the heaviest themes is you either die the good guy or you live long enough to become the villain. And that's why he won't cross lines. He won't kill, even though he feels like he wants to. And like to other people, he'll beat them almost to death, but he won't kill them, because he said once you cross that line, the character says this often, you're in a different place, and you can't come back from there. And so it's interesting that you said that, but people of the world, because some of us mask ourselves in different ways. We're not always hiding who we really are. I mean, I just think that I'm fascinated with the whole idea of that, how we do conceal ourselves, where hypocrisy comes in. That's another conversation, but it is part of this topic.
So I randomly get scolded.
For what?
You're not going to be weird, are you?
Oh,
That's all I could think about. Like last night we were talking, and she was asking me some questions, and she was like, "Why are you being weird?" And I'm like, "I'm not being anything."
Because he was Professor Wheeler instead of my husband.
Yeah. There we go.
I was
Okay.
like- and he was doing the question thing, like trying to lead me into an answer.
Yeah.
Which to me feels like manipulation.
She's always stop therapizing with me and just talk to me. Be Jeff.
Yeah.
That's all I want.
Oh yeah.
But like sometimes, like I do this, 50 hours a day, and then I go teach psychology in the school, right? And sometimes just turning that off button on
Yeah.
doesn't just work for me. And I actually, most of the things I say, I do see the world that way.
Right.
And I recognize a lot of people don't, and that's okay too. I'm more of the, okay, if that's what you believe, and keep it moving. Unless you ask otherwise. I love them like, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, buddy, how much time you got?
Right.
see, it's the opposite at my house. My wife never says to me, in fact, what she says to me sometimes isn't, don't be a pastor here at home. She usually says, like, Drew, you're a pastor. and I go, I know, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. I mean, that's usually what happens. No, I'm kidding. I am joking to a certain extent.
Do they do that to all? Man, this is a whole other conversation we're going down.
Go ahead. What was your
I
question?
thought we
Are we
weren't
ever
doing the
gonna-
victimizing.
No, are we ever going to be right?
Who?
Man,
No.
No, that's the whole point.
yeah.
That's why we're here.
Is,
Right.
is the husband ever going to be right?
Is the husband? The husband takes the rap for it. He's supposed to try to do what's right.
The wives are all just making that face right now. All of you know the face. We're just like, you're gonna get it when you get home.
Wait, we didn't say that was nothing. There was no woman bashing there, was there?
There wasn't no woman bashing
I'm just
there.
saying.
Oh, because you said, "Are we ever going to be?" I think he meant, I
ever
took
gonna
that
be
as him
right?
meaning with God, but not
I thought you meant with
women.
Women.
With the wife.
No.
no.
Not a long time ago. I don't.
I'm not alone.
No. The truth is, we have an easy. We don't really. We have an easy time getting along. It comes back to the same stuff that I tell young people when I give them marriage counseling. I tell, well, if you put God in the middle, and you're here and she's here, and God's in the middle, the closer you get to God, the closer you'll automatically draw to each other. Mm-hmm. So you're quicker to resolve, issues and stuff like that when you have.
It's also when you don't hold the other person responsible for your happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a big one people do in the world. Mm-hmm. Selfish. They make the other person responsible for their happiness, and it's like if both people did that. This comes into the psychology. People that you weaponize scripture. Well, the Bible says a real woman's like this. Well, you're not supposed to use it against the other person. That's for you, dummy. I mean, it's not to you to go, here's what, and she's not supposed to go to you. And the Bible says that's, each of you should read that. And when what you get away from it, what you take from it, is that if you live that way, she's going to love you a lot, and she's going to want to make you happy, and you want to make each other happy because the other person's. It's a perfect recipe, really, if you follow it.
It is. It's like, you need to submit. Well, what are you doing wrong that she doesn't want to submit
Well,
to you,
that's
buddy?
but submit though. That's a whole. I'm
Don't go
not
down
talking
there.
about that in terms. I'm not going to get down the road because the world has really lies and misrepresents what that means in the Bible. But that's way too long of a discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
For me to get into right now. We're already at an hour.
I actually wanted to bring up like developmentally because
Bring it up. Hurry up.
Yeah.
Let's get
I'm
it
going
done.
right at Courtney because
We got plenty
I
of
don't know
time
anything
to-
about that.
I grew up in the Catholic Church, so my identity with God was a little different.
What a season. Next season.
Yeah.
What a season.
Sorry. Go ahead.
But what do you see, with children who are raised in the church? I've always been around in Bible believing churches. I know Courtney was raised in one. I don't want to get here bashing, the Catholic Church or anything like that, but I didn't hear the gospel until I was much older. Mm-hmm. But people who are raised around it have way different lives than people who weren't.
Around what? Catholicism?
Well, not even
Anything.
Catholicism, anything
Anything.
Anything but Christianity?
but. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a developmental side
But
of knowing Christ too. as a
yeah,
child.
so that goes two ways, though. I mean, I know the worst kid in our church was the pastor's son.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's like some people, I had some neighbors once, well, a couple times I've had neighbors, but that like this, where their parents just really pounded the church into their kids to the point where it was, when they grew up, all it was a background part of their life that they couldn't wait to change. And they knew the Bible better than anybody else, to quote the scriptures and the books and all. But it became a background to them because their parents, I don't know how any other way to say this, and somebody's going to pick this apart. They turned Jesus into an idol instead of Jesus, the Son of God that died for our sins. They turned him into an idol, and kids grow up and resent that. They're like, Christianity was just a backdrop of my life. I couldn't wait to get out of my house, and a lot of them are like that. And so it goes both ways. I mean, it all comes back to the person administering the learning. I mean, the one teaching and how they do it, because some kids grew up in a Christian home and they're just godless heathens, and then kids grow up in bad neighborhoods and go to prison and then accept Christ and end up mentoring. So
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's weird. It's a timing thing. I mean, I know that's got to be your experience too in terms of people you encounter.
Well, it's weird as a father. You know, I've never want to force feed it down my children's throat, but I want them to see what we have as a result of the relationship with God. I want them to follow it.
Sure.
I want them to do as such. But when I'm like, you're going to go, you're going to pray, you're going to do this, I think I'm misleading.
So, well, don't you think you have to at a certain age, and then I know what you mean. You got to lead by example, but we're also accountable for what we teach them and what we make them learn. I mean, again, it's a fine line. It depends on, only you know your kids,
Right.
and so the way you work with your kids may not be the way that person's going to be effective at working with their kid. You know that.
Oh, yeah.
So
A lot more is caught than taught.
yeah,
Facts.
I tell people that all the time when it comes to their kids. It's so true.
My favorite prayers are Raymond's. They're the best.
Who's?
Raymond's.
Dear God, please give the poor people cash.
Oh,
And thank you for my pancreas.
yes. Oh, we were
There,
talking
she's the
about that the other day.
It's so pure. It's so direct. It's so grateful. And he's like, what's a pancreas for anyway?
Right. That's a good one. Can I do the duck season now? Rabbit season?
No.
That was the dirtiest look I've ever got in my life when I played rabbit
Did she
season. Duck
snap at you?
No, she better not snap at me.
Listen here.
I
woman.
would never do that to somebody. I don't even like ringing the bell when I go to the dollar store. They got the
know,
bell there.
yeah,
I feel so catty.
Yeah.
Next podcast topic: marriage in the Christian church. how making fun makes life better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that is a big part of it. I mean, it's funny because I think this is almost every time. The guy always crosses the line. Like we'll be joking around. She'll say something about me, big nose. She don't call me big nose, but whatever. And then the guy's always the one that says something where she goes, "That wasn't funny."
Yep.
Girl, I never say that to her. I never say that wasn't funny. She can say anything. I'd be like,
Yeah.
"That's hysterical." But it's a guy who always says something where the girl goes,
That's just the rules.
"That's just now that wasn't funny." And you're
How
like,
it is.
I think it's hilarious.
So one of the best things I've ever done for myself as a human being is write. I do a lot of writing.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of self-reflection,
Sure.
things like that. So anytime she goes too far and she knows she's gone too far, she's like, "You're going to go write about that in your journal, aren't you?"
Right.
Dear diary, wah, wah, wah.
Yeah.
It's true love.
I always go, no, it's not in the diary. It's on the dartboard.
There you go.
No, I don't have a dartboard anymore, but I wouldn't put my wife's picture on there. It'd be like a crude crayon drawing of just, things. Not,
Things are different.
yeah.
Things.
Yeah, so let's move on. No, I'm just kidding. So,
Closing up.
closing up. Final thoughts.
What does psychology prove? Psychology proves very simply that deep down inside every man, there is a foundational understanding of God. And any human being ever created, there is a foundational understanding of God. And we're given choice of who that is. And we'll choose all different ones. We'll choose sex, we'll choose drugs, we'll choose money, or we can choose the God. Psychologically, we know that the people who choose the God and understand Christ as their Savior have a different brain development than any other people in the world.
That's right. That's right.
Whether you accept that or not, do the research. Don't listen to me. Go look it up.
Courtney, what's your final thoughts?
I don't know. That was a lot of information. How psychology shapes the belief in Jesus. I think the similarities are that we focus a lot on, like when it comes to religion and psychology, we focus a lot on the why until we drive ourselves crazy instead of focusing on like the solution. And I don't know, the way it affected me is that there were things that I just kept hitting my head over and over again. And it wasn't until I asked God that there was a solution. And that was enough for me. And that's all.
All right. Grace?
Well, it's about how we govern our thoughts. And when you think about before and after, I don't have, the going to church all the time, especially when I was a child. So I have the before and after. Who was I before? Who am I now? Completely different.
That's a great point.
Completely
That's kind
different.
of,
And the way that I look at other people is different.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, with everything that everyone is saying, that it is going to be different for everybody, and everybody needs to take the journey in their own way. But yeah, if science is the language of God, and science is telling us that deep down inside us, we know there's something. We just have to come to the realization and the acceptance of what that something is. And maybe that takes longer for some people than others, but scientifically, it's there, right there.
Yeah, how many times does God have to tap you on the shoulder before
Right.
you turn around and say, yeah, okay.
Exactly.
You got shoulder taps?
Oh, yeah.
I
all
got
for my
thorough
life.
beat
Yeah.
down.
You know what you-
That's what
what you-
happens. That's what happens when you continually turn away from the shoulder tap. You finally get beat down, right?
what you said earlier, what you opened up with. I heard Adrian Rogers one time. He's not with us anymore. He's an old pastor. He was telling a story about lie detector tests that were administered. I don't remember what the purpose was for, but the point is, they were asking people. One of the questions is, "Do you believe in God?" And on the same questionnaire, they said, "Are you Christian?" And the highest number of deception were the atheists who said they don't believe in God. That's when deception was detected at the highest rate. And I was like, what a fascinating survey. It speaks to what you said a second ago and what I said at the beginning, that people that don't want God to be real, because they don't want the consequences. It's like even people that claim they don't believe in God sometimes are just railing against and mad at God, and they don't want the prospect to be true. Anyway, I think it was a good conversation. I really don't know how to condense this into one clever wrap up, but there's a lot here that we could have covered. But this was a fun conversation.
Yeah, I think we should come back to this
We should. We will.
and do a part 2.
Okay. All right. That's it. We're out. Thanks, guys.